All right, so we are recording this, by the way, so we'll put this up on our YouTube channel.
You want to wait a couple minutes?
He's not
He will
coming.
not be
He's not going to be here.
Yeah.
Correct.
And one thing too, this isn't through this system getting taped, so use your outdoor voices,
Outdoor voices?
if possible.
Okay, then I'll call the meeting to order. Todd, you've got the roll call?
Oh, no, it's me.
Okay, Lauren.
Madison College, Wanakee Community School District. David?
Here.
Yep. Village of Wanakee,
Here.
Dane County,
Here.
Jim Elfro, public member.
Here. Okay, do we need to do any appointments
Yep.
at this point?
I'll motion for you to be chair.
Okay, we've got a motion
Second?
and a second. Okay, then I'll call the question. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Ayes have it. Okay.
I'll motion Jim to be public member.
Reappointed as the public member. Okay,
Second.
we have a second. Okay, I'll call the question. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Ayes have it. Okay, review minutes from 2018 Annual Joint Review Board meeting. We have a motion that we need.
Motion to approve.
Motion to approve, is that made?
Second.
And second, okay, over here. Okay, we'll call the question, all in favor, say aye. Opposed? Ayes have it. Next, we've got review annual PE 300 report on the performance and status of tax incremental districts 2 through 7. Todd Taves.
Good evening. For each district, you should have a copy of a report that we've assembled. And as you are likely aware, the requirement is this body convene annually for purposes of reviewing the PE 300, which is the Department of Revenue form that the village has to file annually. Essentially, it's just a statement of revenues and expenditures. So with the report that we've prepared, what we try to do is provide a little bit more detail, and in particular, looking at the cash flows. One thing I would note on the agenda is we kind of broke this into two sections administratively. So the village was required this year to report on TIDs number 2 through 7. They have prepared for you reports on TIDs 8 and 9, but you'll notice within that packet for those TIDs that there's not a PE 300. And the simple reason is that those TIDs are not yet required to report being newer. So next year, when we have the meeting, you'll actually have a PE 300 for those for the first year. So with that, I'm going to turn to the reports. They all follow the same template, so I'll kind of spend maybe a little bit more time on the structure on the first one, and then we'll walk through the remaining ones. I'm going to kind of focus on the numbers, but I'd certainly invite Todd or Renee or Chris, if you've got any color commentary you want to provide about what's going on in the TID, please feel free to jump in. So what I'm going to do with each TID is go to what would be the third page, and you'll see offset from that the map. So this would be the Arboretum Office Park. And the first spreadsheet in each packet is it's both a historical going back a few years as well as a projection of the incremental value within the district. So in this particular case, what you see in the green column is that the district had 20.3 million of incremental value as of the first of this year. That jump that was seen as of 1/1/19, which is really 2018 construction. That was a result of completion of the Bright Star Senior Living Project, 2 single-story office buildings. There was a remodeling of an existing building for Wanakee Vet Clinic, and then also a daycare, Brilliant Beginnings, remodeled a former bar and restaurant. So in terms of 2019 and going forward, there's nothing in particular we're projecting, but if you flip to page 4, what you'll see is that 20.3 million of value that's there now. If the tax rate remains the same for 2020 budget, that amount of incremental value will bring in 422,000 and change for next year's budget. With all the TIDs, we've assumed a 1% appreciation factor, so you'll see that number go up slightly in each subsequent year until the district's final statutory year of 2023. From a cash flow standpoint, this will be on page 5. First thing I mentioned is this district has now moved past its expenditure period that ended in March of last year, meaning that we can't spend any new project cost dollars. But what you'll see on the expenditures portion is that we have a sharing arrangement with TID number 5. So the primary outlay for this district is that projected transfer to TID number 5 for the remaining 4 years of its life, and essentially it would be whatever's available after paying some minor village administrative costs is expected to be transferred to that TID. One thing we did within each packet is at this body's request, we included a copy of the projection from last year. And I won't go through that, but I would just indicate that as compared to where the district looked to go last year, this is no change. So again, plan here is basically to use the resources that this TID is generating under the share that the Joint Review Board permitted to assist TID 5 paying its project costs. I'm happy to answer any questions on TID number 2.
One question I noticed in all of them was that the village administrative costs went from around $670 each year for every different TID to $1,670. So it went up by $1,000 every year.
So I tried to look at the administrative costs a lot closer this year. So once we started having to file the PE 300 and do these meetings, it actually costs us a little bit more because we have to do the filings and pay Ellers and things like that. So the extra $1,000 is really a truer picture of what it costs us each year.
Well, I mean, more than doubled. And actually in this one, last year went from, which I don't know, it's hard to say what point we were at last year when we had the meeting. It was listed at $650 and now it went to over $5,000.
In 2023?
No, in 2018. In 2023, yeah, it went from 3,000 to 5,000.
Well, so I also tried to look, so in the final year of a TID, we have to have an independent audit.
Right.
And in 2018, we also had to have an independent audit because that was the end of the expenditure period. And so when we did these cash flows in the past, we maybe hadn't predicted all of these things. This one's getting closer to the end of its life. And we had to do that audit in 2018 as well. So that's why the number was higher in 2018 and why it's projected to be higher in 2023, because it does cost a fair amount. The audit in 2018 was for about, 15 years worth of data that they had to audit. So that does get to be a little costly.
So really, we should be looking at TIDs from now on, almost triple administrative costs is what we thought they were, right?
Well, you'll
Exactly.
see in some of the other ones, the administrative cost was something like 20,000, and I backed those down. I was trying to be consistent amongst the TIDs, and so every year it's not going to go up.
Sure.
These should be the numbers, or much, much closer to the numbers. In some of the other ones, they had a formula in there where it was doing a percent, and the costs were much higher, and I brought those back down.
Okay. On the actual projected expenditures part, last year we were saying it was going to be about $300,000 a year transfer. This year it's suddenly $450,000. How did that increase by 50%? Was that a decision made somewhere? 'Cause
Where are
the
you
transfers
seeing?
Okay, so if you're looking on the cash flow,
Yep.
the transfer to TID 5, last year we projected all the way out to 2023, roughly 290-some thousand to 300,000. Now this year we're projecting it at 450,000.
So I think if you look at the report that was done last year, you'll notice it still ended with a zero balance.
Right.
So, the difference there is we had $7.3 million in increase in incremental value. So in other words, there's more on a projected basis now to transfer going forward.
Couldn't we close the TID faster?
I think the intent is to leverage as much of those dollars is available to transfer to TID 5, right?
Well, I think it's worth looking at. The matter is that the less that is transferred leads to TID 5 staying open longer. So it would shift like this. So I guess the relevant question is there a benefit, is there a greater benefit to all the taxing jurisdictions to do one or the other?
Well, I mean, you'd have to go look at TID 5, obviously, first. I was just wondering how that decision got made, that was the direction of go.
Well, so TID 2 just gives everything that they have left over at the end of the year to TID 5, and because they generated more increment, they had more to give. Primarily because of the healthcare facility that was built.
And that
Right.
decision was approved by the Joint Review Board. There wasn't a staff level or board decision of any sort to modify that. It simply is a mechanism that was approved by the Joint Review Board.
Oh, at the time, whenever they made the first decision to go
Yep.
to TID 5 was all excess goes to TID 5?
Yes.
Yep.
Okay.
Any other questions on TID 2? All right, skipping TID 3. Again, I'm going to go right to page 3. You can see the map on the left side of the page. This is the Waunakee Business Park developed by MLG. And on page 3, we again show actual historical value. There's just over $40 million in incremental value on the ground as of the first of this year. In terms of what fed that 2018 construction year, there was a Helen Brand glass expansion that was completed and also a secure storage facility. In terms of what's occurred or is occurring this year, we are estimating $900,000 increase in value due to expansion in Octopi Brewing, and then also $900,000 for a completion of the Zen Dogs Pet Wellness Clinic, or $1.8 million in total anticipated to be added this year.
There is in fact another building under construction, Todd.
And they go up further.
There's the RW Heating. RG, thank you. RG Heating has their shell is up. They're moving along on their project.
So page 4 for 2020, we would anticipate about $830,000 in tax increment, and again growing in the following year due to the construction that's occurring this year, as well as a 1% assumed economic inflation rate. On the cash flow, the primary expenditures within this district are allocated debt service from the village's 2012 GO refunding bonds. That debt has maturities that run out through the year 2023. There are also several PAYGO development incentive agreements that you can see the forward-looking schedule of payments. And then lastly, there was an advance to this district from other funds of the village that the village is scheduled, that the TID is scheduled to repay, and you can see the repayment schedule that's been established for that. At the end of 18, this district did have a negative fund balance, taking into consideration that advance of about $321,000. And we are anticipating that by the final district closure year of 2024, that the district will recover its project costs. And again, as compared to last year, there's no change. This district, as of last year, was also projected to run out its entire maximum life through the year 2024.
Just for context, that road repayment, the Frank H. Street was extended east to support the St. John's property development where Mike Moe's Martial Arts and a number of other users are in. So that's for that infrastructure extending Frank H. east.
And we chose to do an internal advance instead of borrowing general obligation debt for that.
So, looking at last year's again, you initially showed in 2024 a repayment to the developer of $120,000, right? This year, we're showing $450,000 being repaid to the developer in 2024. why are we paying them $300,000 more? What was that?
Because there's more increment earned. They get, so we've been drawing on a line of credit that they've had when there has ever been a TIF shortfall. And part of the agreement, we get money from them and that'll continue. Well, probably 2019, hopefully will be the last year we have to draw on that. And then part of that agreement was we would repay them as much as we could up to the amount that they had to pay us from their line of credit. So because we have more increment coming in, there is more to pay them back.
So
you'll-
where do we show the loan that they gave that we are paying back?
So in the fourth column over, the line of credit or developer payment, that's how much they have had to pay us or projected to pay us for 2019 each year. I don't know if this shows the grand total of what.
No, because it just goes, this uses the 17
but
audit
they've-
space.
It's well over the 447,000 that we are paying them back. They're not going to recover, at least under the current scenario here in the cash flows, what they've had to pay to us.
Doesn't it seem like the final cash flow projection should somehow show those balances in a way that someone could look at this and say, they gave us that much money, we're paying it back. As it looks like right now, I mean, if you took this and compared to last year, I mean, the 2019 document shows that the locked developer payment was $250,000. Last year, it was showing they paid $265,000 from 2017 on, which is kind of curious because, well, last year, it didn't show them paying anything in 2017. Now it shows that they did. And the numbers in 2018 and 19 are different. But overall, I'm looking at a 2017 to 2024 on both documents, and the numbers, $20,000 difference there.
Yeah,
But for some reason, we're paying them.
Right. I
Where did
see
the
your point that a
300,000 get
cumulative balance would be useful. A cumulative amount, maybe in one of the footnotes, as to how much they have paid us. Because like where you say there's nothing on the 2017 line last year, there's nothing on there at all. We didn't actually show that 2017 detail expenses at all.
Right, you just
Just
showed
a
the cumulative
cumulative
and the
balance.
principal. That was the only thing
But
you
I
showed.
think that that is a good point, that the letter of credit piece, we could easily add up and show how much they've paid us over all the years. I don't know that number off the top of my head. So that you could see that they've paid us, say, 600,000 and we're repaying them 447,000. Those are just an example numbers. So I agree that that would be.
Yeah,
a
because
good
I gotta
addition.
say, when I'm looking at 2019, total expenditures looks to be 1.4 million more than was expected the previous year. Yet, when you start adding across, it doesn't seem, when you start adding it up, how did we get from, what's the last year of expenditures on this? It's not,
It was also last year,
Okay.
2018.
so last year's document should have shown all expenditures that were expected to come out of this TID district, right?
But we didn't have as much increment projected last year, so then there was a lower repayment to the developer
Yeah,
because there was an increment to do so.
But even when I take the 300,000 to go to the developer, the total expenditures is 6.8 million compared to 5.4 million last year. So everything went up, a grand total of $1.4 million. Yet we were supposed to have been done with expenditures as of 2017.
No,
2018.
part of that is, if you look at the current forecast, I did go back in as compared to last year, and I put in the 2017 numbers. So if you look at 2017 on this year, you'll see there's $1,098,000.
And then if you add the 400,000, that just about puts you at 1.4 to the developer. So that gets really close to the two differences.
Yes.
Okay.
Any other questions on 3?
Number 4.
Bid 4, this is the Stolpe Cannon site, the senior center and senior housing project. Again, I'm going to look at that increment projection worksheet just past the map. Not projecting anything going forward, but as of the first of this year, we did have just under $5 million of increment on the ground. At the current tax rate, that's expected to bring in just over $100,000 for the 2020 budget, and same assumption going forward as to 1% increase in values. On the cash flow, the district had a positive fund balance at the end of 2018 of about $153,000. There is a portion of that same 2012 GO bond that's allocated to this district, and you can see the remaining debt service payments forecasted through the end of the maturity schedule of that debt, and that will be paid off in the year 2023. One thing I would note here is we are projecting this district would have accumulated sufficient funds within its balance by the year 2022 that could actually pay off that final debt payment a year early and close. And that 2022 projected closure is the same year as we had anticipated last year, so no significant shift in terms of the anticipated performance of this district. One thing that was mentioned in the narrative, and maybe Todd could speak further to this, but it's my understanding that there is a phase 2 environmental analysis that's either been done or will be done this year, and one possibility of some additional project costs could be potential environmental remediation.
Yeah, there were over the course of the past year, there was the discovery of some odors coming from the sump crack, essentially, and the readings that we took indicated levels of chemicals that required us to sort of investigate and figure out where this was coming from. So we did, with anticipation that as project costs to this district, we engaged our environmental engineers to assist us with some test wells to determine where something's coming in under the building somehow from somewhere. So we've been in the process of determining where is that, what direction is that flow coming from? And we're in the midst, I believe, unless somebody knows something new, we're in the midst of that process still. What we have noticed is that the levels, they've done more readings within the sump crack, and levels are declining. So does that mean that we don't know what that means? That's why we hired people who know more than us. So that's the work we're doing.
And so that's just kind of a heads up that is out there, and could be something we would have further information on that could have some impact on costs when we report next year.
To anyone listening who does go to the Village Center, I can tell you that we have vented the crack within the parameters allowed by the DNR. So whatever is causing the odors, those odors are going vented out the roof of the building.
Just a fun question as to how sometimes these documents get developed. Last year in the document on tax increment projection worksheet, in 2015 it had 0 value added, and 17 and 18 was 0, 2016 was 200,000. But now this year, 2015 shows 4.5 million, and 17 and 18 show about 100,000 each. Why wasn't the 4 million in 2015 last year?
It's already in the total increment column instead of the value added column.
Right.
We changed a little bit of the formatting, it looks like.
But then,
But the values are
but last year you showed 2016 had 200,000 and also showed over in the total increment. I mean, the total that maybe I'm not understanding the title headings, but just to be clear, wouldn't the total increment be the taxable value in that zone, in that TID, right?
Correct.
Okay, so it says 2014, there was 0 taxable, right?
You're looking at the old,
The old one, I think,
Yeah.
was just the cumulative balance, perhaps, put into the total increment column.
that 4,502,700 on the older one,
Mhm.
that was everything that had been established there in that year and prior years. And that's the same 4.5 million you see on the new analysis in the year 2015 as well.
I'm just wondering why it's kind of appearing and disappearing. Yet 2015, 16 was there, and like the inflation increment for 2015 and the old one is there, but it's not in this year's document. I'm just trying to understand how and why
It's
these.
it's on this page. So there's the inflation.
But when you say-
What
can
I
you-
tried to do is to have each of these reports have the spreadsheets be exactly the same. In the older ones, there were some discrepancies between how the information was portrayed. So what you should find is with this year's, they're consistent in terms of how the information is displayed.
Well, okay, so last year, you had an inflation increment for, say, 2017 showed 47,000. This year, under inflation increment,
Where are you seeing?
that's on, it's still on the tax increment projection worksheet?
And that's because we now know what the 2017 actual value added was, so we don't need to project out what the inflation increment.
Oh, so you do the inflation increment only as a forward projection?
Right.
Right.
Okay, and
And then
last
once
year
we
you would have
know
known
that-
2017 at the time of the 2018 meeting?
Correct.
Right.
Okay.
So now, in the value added for this particular one, those are true actual values that we know now. So we
so
take it out
really-
of the inflation increment column.
The outlier isn't that the value added was missing from 2015, 17, and 18 from the 2018 document. It's the fact that 2016 was there in a weird way. That would have been 0 instead of 200,000 because that's how you were doing it last year. Is that what you're saying?
For 2016, the value added, that was the actual value added,
Right.
207,000. And there was no inflation increment for 16 because we knew the 16 number by then.
Well, then
The
why-
difference here is last year we did our meeting in July,
Mhm.
and this year we waited, so we would have better actual numbers. So that's why last year we only had actual for 16, but this year we have actual for also 17 and 18 because we waited till after August 15th when the true numbers came out.
So the 4.5 million of 2015 then value added, that wasn't put there because on the first year you just do the base or?
The 4.5 million, I believe, is a cumulative number.
It's all value that was generated since the inception of the TID above the base value through 1/1/16.
Okay.
And that's just because we don't have this going all the way back to year one.
I'm just curious why you did it one way last year. You had it at 0 and this year you show it.
So as Todd was saying, so as these were developed over the years, they weren't necessarily between the TIF 2, 3, 4, 5. They were all slightly different, and now Todd has taken over our account and he's tried to make them consistent so that TID 2 looks exactly like how we're doing TID 4 in terms of the layout. And the other ones sort of evolved as they came on board. So that's why you're seeing some differences. I mean, the values aren't different, but just the formatting is a little different.
Okay.
Other questions on 4?
TID 5.
TID 5, looking at page 3, this is the downtown redevelopment district, portions of which were subsequently overlaid by TID 8, which we'll talk about in a moment. The total valuation on the ground as of the first of this year was about 23.3 $3 million. That $1 million that was added in 2018 was primarily a result of economic appreciation on a particular project. In terms of what's occurred or occurring this year, although we didn't project a particular value for it, is at the Lone Girl, there is a small build-out that's occurring on the second floor, which potentially could add some value that would show up in the numbers next year. At the current tax rate on page 4 for budget year 2020, we would anticipate about $483,000 in increment collection, same 1% economic appreciation assumption. On the cash flow, I would note on the left-hand side, you'll see that transfer from TID number 2 column. So those will match the numbers in the TID 2 report in terms of what has been transferred and is projected to be transferred through that district's closure in 2023. In terms of project costs, this particular district is allocated portions of 3 different debt issuances that are shown in the center. There are also 2 pay-as-you-go development incentive obligations that are listed. The latter of those runs out through the year 2026. And when we factor in the debt principal outstanding, the balances of PAYGO obligations outstanding, we are projecting that this district will have enough money within its balance to pay off those obligations in the year 2025 as compared to last year's projection. That's 1 year earlier.
But that's mainly because we moved another almost $1 million from TID 2, right?
It's a combination of that as well as a little additional value within the district.
Any other questions?
I would just want to clarify the question about the transfer from TID 2. So is your question that how did it go 1 year earlier in one single year? How did that happen? How did that adjustment occur? Because on a single year, the transfer it was about $300,000 this year from TID 2. Is that correct? You had mentioned $1 million. I just want to make sure that I'm understanding the parameters of what you're referencing.
Because if you look in the later years, it went from being about $300,000 a year to $450,000 a year. And by the time you add up, if you go down the bottom of the total TID transfer, it's about $1 million higher.
Okay, so you're talking about the fact
Cumulative.
that Arboretum has increased its ability to contribute. Okay, got it. All right. Thanks.
Okay.
TID 6. On page 3 of the report, this is the Kilkenny Farms development. $45.1 million on the ground in terms of value as of the first of this year. The projects that drove the value increase in 2018 were the Animar Pet Store and also 6 new single-family homes. You'll notice that for construction years, the current year 19 as well as 20, we're showing about $7.5 million in projected value. That includes 2 additional single-family homes, completion of Boston's Pizza, and start of the construction of the Laurel this year to be completed next year, the 82-unit apartment complex. So that, again, 7.5 is a projection of additional value. At the current tax rate for 2020, we would expect a increment collection of about $936,000. Because of that forecasted increase resulting from the projects I mentioned in 19 and 20, as well as the 1% assumption on economic increase, we would expect that collection to go a little over $1 million in 21 and then increase a bit each year after that. From a cash flow perspective, we have 4 different debt obligations of the village that this TID is paying towards. There is 2 currently in force municipal revenue obligations, or pay-as-you-go development incentive payments that are projected to end in the years 25 and 26. Based on this current forecast and the assumptions that we're making as to value and tax rate and economic appreciation, we are indicating we would have sufficient funds within the district to retire the outstanding debt balances in the year 2029. As compared to last year, that report showed 2035, so this would be 6 years earlier than that at this point. Any questions? Yes, sir.
So the biggest change I see on the total expenditures, it's increased by about 50%. It went from 11 million last year to 16 million in total expenditures this year. And the $5 million seems to mainly come from a capital outlay of 2.3 million in 2017 that wasn't in last year's report. And then a 1.75 million payment to Kilkenny MRO over the course of the next 6-7 years.
So that capital outlay, and again, if you look at last year's report, 2017 just showed the end balance, but notice the balance doesn't change in 2017. So that 2.3 million was there last year as well, it just wasn't enumerated.
And I believe the Kilkenny MRO was issued earlier in 2019 per their developer agreement. So that's why that was
the 1.7
added.
has already been paid?
No.
No, the MRO became an obligation in 2019, so we put it on here. The first payment starts, or is November 1st of 2019, and it's payable over those 7 years. Yes.
Is that another one of, so the Kilkenny MRO, that's the developer? Or who's that?
Yes.
Okay, so again, is this another one where they loaned money up front and we're paying them back?
I believe so. That was,
Or is this,
That's probably part of their developers agreement.
right, it was
But
part of the original
negotiated.
negotiated developers agreement. So
They're not delayed.
I don't believe it was new costs in 2019 that we're issuing it for. It dealt with the beginning of the project. And now they've reached, or they've been able to show that they've met their obligations of the developer agreement, and then we issued the MRO earlier this year.
okay.
If there's no further questions on 6, we'll jump over to 7. This would be the Renew Air project, renovation of existing industrial sites. And as of the first of this year, there was just shy of $5 million in incremental value. And if we look at the increment projection, at the current tax rate, that's expected to bring in about $103,000 in increment for the 2020 budget year. The sole project cost other than administrative expense in this district is a pay-as-you-go development incentive, and you can see the forecasted payments for that running through the year 2040. However, because the TID has an annual positive balance that gets added, we're projecting that we would accumulate enough money to pay off that MRO by the year 2030, which is no change from the prior year's projection.
So the tax increment went down this year.
It went down, but the reason there's no change is if you look at last year's projection, there was, we had assumed at that point that the value added as a result of 2017 construction was 5.7 million, and in reality it ended up being 7.2. So with the loss, it kind of gets you right back to that same original ballpark. And the loss in value, did we determine that was personal property?
So the state does the assessment for Renew Air as a manufacturer, and what they explained to us, because we noted that the value went down, significantly is that they made a shift from what had previously been considered personal property, and I think they've been doing this more universally. They're trying to move that more to real estate, and it's not quite an apples to apples move. When you move it out of personal property, it actually goes down in real estate, or under the real estate category. But in the, to a potential benefit for making that shift as personal property, as the state has started to move away from personal property and they've exempted certain things, the fact that it's in real estate will actually help hold its value. If they would suddenly exempt another type of personal property, we could have lost all that value. So that's, I think, a shift that the state has been making, trying to better align things and take more out of personal property and put it into real estate. We're still protected because the MRO will only pay, you know, we don't have to pay more in the MRO than we would get in increments, so we're protected that way.
Anyone else? Okay, so that's 2 through 7. Do you need anything at this point? Or wait until we're on 8 now? Okay, moving on to numbers 8 and 9.
So 8, this is the district which partially overlays pit number 5. And this was created, or the impetus for this was the Hovde Lamp House project, which is being completed this year. So in the first year of the district, we had partial valuation of that project, a total of about $2.4 million as the first of this year. We're projecting roughly $14.5 million to be added as a result of the completion of that project in the current calendar year. So for 2020, again, partial valuation, increment collection of roughly $50,000, and then increasing to about $350,000 for 2021, and then escalating each year thereafter due to that, in this case, 1.25% appreciation factor, which came from the original projections that were associated with the analysis that was done for that project. When we look at the cash flow, in addition to the pay-as-you-go incentive for the Hovde project, there is also a debt service allocated, a portion of the village's 2018 bonds, and you can see the payment schedule set forth for that. This is somewhat similar to the earlier discussion on the line of credit, in that this development agreement has a feature where, to the extent that there is less incremental revenue coming in than the village's obligations, there will either be a reduction in that MRO payment, which is treated like a revenue here, or an actual payment by the developer in the form of a pilot in order to make that full MRO payment. And then you'll notice in future years, specifically 2031 through 2036, to the extent that those payments are required and made, they can be reimbursed to the developer at that point in time. So based on the current projections, what we're reflecting here is that the MRO would be fully satisfied and the district in a position to close in the year 2039. And again, this is the first forecast since the project plan, so there's not a prior year's forecast as a basis of comparison, but we'll include that within next year's document.
Questions?
So just to be clear, as we're starting this one new this year, when you put in value added in 2018 of 2 million and value added of 15 million this year, that will be the property tax value as of the end of 2019 for that property would be $17-some million, right?
It's an estimate.
Okay, that's an estimate of what that value will be at. I gotta say, I don't understand how the state sets these up or how they require you to report or whatever. But in a weird way, true value added be what the value of that property is versus the value of the property before they did it? This is just pure, it's not really value added, it's just pure property tax base, right?
It's incremental value. So it's.
If the property was
whatever
worth zero, this is what it will be worth at the end of that year. Or is this the increase in property
This is the
value
increase
over what it was
over-
in
that's right.
2017?
So if you look back on this page, or any of these for that matter, you'll see there's a base value in the upper right-hand corner. So when TID number 8 was created, there was just shy of $16 million that was in that territory.
Right.
So when we're talking about these numbers on the next page, that's what has been added on top of that value.
So you're saying that, taking your projection numbers and assuming everything goes right and ends up where you're after, would the new value of the property be 32 million or 25 million? Because, I mean, on the right, you say tax increment of 10.8. Do I add the 10.8 to the 15? Or do I add the value added to the 15?
To get to the total
To
value
get
of the
what
district.
would be, if I had to go to base value at the very end of the TID, what would that number be, based on the projection?
If you
Not
wanted,
base
You mean
value.
increment
You mean
value.
the total value?
The total value of that
it would
property?
be,
Yeah,
it would
the
be this, in
15.
this case, 17 million plus the, call it 16 million.
Okay, 17
Yeah.
plus 16.
Yeah.
Because base value
Okay.
doesn't change.
That's right.
All right, thank you. I was just curious.
And lastly, TID 9. This was the TID that was created last year for a proposed new building for Tormac.
And I can add a preference, a
Go right ahead.
pre-comment to that. The Tormac project, as was proposed when we were creating this district, has been suspended due to the tariff impact. It has dramatically changed their ability to do business the way they had anticipated. In fact, they currently have that property listed for sale. And it's on the market today. Is there a potential that the international economic climate can change and that they could go back to their plan? It's entirely possible. But as it sits, there is no activity within the district, and I can't say that there's any planned activity.
So this particular projection is not particularly useful. At the end of 18, the village had expended roughly $16,000 for creating the TID and other creation-related activities. So at this point, what the forecast shows is just annual administrative expenses, and obviously, if at a certain point in the nearer term, it becomes apparent that the project is not going to proceed, the village would obviously move to close the district rather than keeping it open and continuing to incur costs. So, as Todd mentioned, this is just kind of a wait and see at this point in terms of where this district goes, if anywhere.
Okay, any other questions?
Just a general question on that. Is Tormac itself thinking about closing down or just the new expansion?
In talking to the president there, Daniel Rogi, they've modified the way in which they do their work, and the ways in which they source or outsource some of their handling or the way they move inventory around the country. So last I talked to them, they're doing well. They're happy where they're at and are continuing to do what they've been doing. They particularly enjoy the relationship with the school district, with some of their technology pieces in use at the Fab Lab at the school. So they're doing well, holding their own, I guess, is the way to put it.
So if their facility would just go up in value, because it is a TID, wouldn't the increase in value generate more money?
They have no facility there. This district
This was
is vacant
a
land.
new parcel that they purchased
Okay, so
for
it's just
this
a parcel.
purpose, right?
Yep.
I think so.
But the value of that parcel, what would go up? Let's say $1,000. Would that be a tax incremental?
I mean, there's inflation.
It actually lost value this past year, but yes, if the land were just to go up in value, that could generate increment. Again, it's got to get above that base value in order for increment to be generated.
Just a general question.
Okay, then, if we have no other questions, we have the resolution.
Could I offer one other question? I wonder whether, and I'm not sure if this is a discussion for the village board or for the joint review board, but, and we alluded to it earlier, this relationship between TID 2 and TID 5. We looked at that, we had Mike Harrigan from Elders look at that a few years ago.
I'd say probably in 2017, maybe.
Yeah, and it's fair to say that we've seen some change, especially in TID 2, in that short of time with a couple really nice projects that have made the value, changed the value there. Is there a reason to look again at how that sharing works and whether there's reason to perhaps suspend sharing sooner, to close TID 2 sooner, or maintain it to the benefit of closing TID 5 as soon as we project? And I don't know where's the place to have that discussion, or if you care to even have it. I just wanted to bring.
When you look at school financing, one of the best things we can do as a school district is keep our cash flow at a fairly steady level. That seriously affects shared revenue, as I'm sure Dane County could probably even go further than I can on talking about tertiary school districts, which we are. Which means if we go too high, they actually start taking state revenue away from us. The more businesses that hit our property tax level faster. So the more we can smooth that transition out, the better the school district is. So the concept of having multiple TID districts coming out at once versus having them kind of staggered, we're better off having them staggered. I'm not sure, the reason I was asking so many questions is I've got to go back and work with our business manager and get as clean a picture as to what happens each time one of these comes out versus this referendum we're talking about. So it would probably be worthwhile to have that discussion, and I got to admit, I don't know who makes that decision. Whether it's a joint, I would assume it's a joint review board, but it might not be. Makes a decision on this sharing between TID districts.
Like when to stop it or to stop it.
When to stop it, or when to increase it, or when to, somebody made the decision to do the share between TID 2 and 5. I haven't been around long enough to know when that happened.
That was in 2012, I believe, when the TID 5 was in extreme red. That led to the decision making.
Good, I got on the school board in 2013.
Okay.
Yes, it definitely.
You and I are good. So who made that? What group makes that decision?
That was the joint review board.
Okay, so it might be worthwhile over the near future here to, one, I'll work with the school district and we'll get back to the village, and the concept of bringing the joint review board, if it looks like we'd be better off doing something other than going to $450,000 a year between the two districts.
So I agree. If there's a strategy that can really satisfy everybody in this picture, let's go for it. And maybe that's a follow-up that, Todd, we should have to talk about how maybe we go about that discussion.
And I'll find out if it has any meaning to us.
Todd, say.
I think it's, if we get feedback from the school district, we model that and we
Okay.
understand how it impacts, your end of the equation.
I'll work with Steve Summers, we'll figure out is it a statistical effect or not? I mean, if it's insignificant, obviously, it's insignificant.
Okay.
If it's helpful, then we might want to pursue that, but we'll let you know.
Okay. And I can happy to join you with Steve if that would work out.
So we're looking at, just with your comments, 2022, 2023, 2024, 2025, 4 years in a row that TID is going to close, is where we're at. And it looks like it's about $100 million in value total. Just looking at the different numbers. I'm in agreement, whatever's going to work best for school districts financing, our financing, that's absolutely what we should do. Not that I'm excluding the county too, but hey.
I do one other, and I don't want to delay us finishing the meeting. I do want to say one thing that might be a point of discussion, at least starting with the village board, and we'll see where it goes. But the village completed a housing task force report that looked at an array of options, and they had a number of recommendations. And I don't remember if it's in the recommendation list, but the ability of a community, I think it requires joint review board to extend the life of a district for purposes related to affordable housing. And I don't know all the specifics, but I just want to bring up that issue may come to the surface as the village board looks at suggested approaches to addressing affordable housing in our community. There's no recommendations specifically saying we should or shouldn't, except that we should carefully look at that.
But enacting such a resolution would still require a joint review.
It does, right? No?
Yeah, yeah.
Wait, Todd?
Well, so the village could extend a district on its own
For 1 year.
for 1 year. I noticed some of them said that they had multiple years they could be extended, but only 1 year would be subject to the village on its own.
For the express purpose of spending those dollars on affordable housing.
Is that a state law? Okay.
I can't predict what the outcome will be, but it would be publicly discussed, and certainly the school district would want to involve it early in the conversation.
Absolutely.
Well, I know our superintendent's on that task force, and so
He is.
I'm sure he'll give me more than I need here.
Okay, so then we need to approve the resolution. Pat, do you have a copy of that?
I brought signature copies.
Okay.
It was in the packet.
I'm going to just provide one original on each end, and if everyone can sign both.
Do we need a motion to
You want-
approve that?
Yeah, actually.
Yes.
I'll motion to approve.
The resolution. Okay, motion made and seconded. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Ayes have it. All right, then we just need to sign.
Do you need a motion to adjourn?
Yes.
As soon as we're done signing.
Oh, you can have that.
I'll take that one. Motion to adjourn.
Okay, we got a motion to adjourn. And a second. Call the question. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Did you guys all say aye on that?
Aye.
Okay, you want to stay, you can.
Anyone opposed, stay by yourself.